to Season 3, Episode 3 of the Woke Mommy Chatter podcast. I know we had a hiatus there of, I think it's been 3 weeks, and I wasn't planning on that at all. The plan was to launch Season 3 and to go right through, but to be honest, life just got in the way. And then off the back of that, Black women and mental health and taking time for yourself, and I decided that I was not going to stress myself to try and get the podcast out. I was going to live my life and just kind of let the chips fall, and that's what I did. So if you were looking for a podcast and not seeing one, I apologize, but I just did not have capacity to get them out over the last 3 weeks, but I'm back now. Over the holidays, I'm going to be posting on Thursdays instead of Tuesdays, and then the second week in January, we'll go back to the regular schedule, which is every Tuesday. Before we get into this week's episode, and I have to say this is a great episode, I have a few announcements. So firstly, after completing a completely unscientific survey, I've decided against doing a Patreon. So I know I've been saying forever that I'm going to be doing a Patreon page, and you'll be able to support the podcast through Patreon. But I spoke to a few people, and they've kind of said to me that they don't really feel comfortable with Patreon, and they thought it would be better to do something, to have another option. So I have opted to open support on the website. So if you log on to the Woke Mommy Chatter website at www.wokemommychatter, so WOKE Mommy Chatter.com, you can now click the donate button and provide a donation to help support the podcast. And really what that does is it helps me kind of reinvest into creating the podcast in terms of guests and all the things that kind of go into building and creating the podcast. So I'm really excited to have that up and running. It takes a lot of work. It really does, to get this done every week. In addition to, being a mommy and all the other things, and a wife and employee and all the other fun stuff that I am. So I'm really excited to have this. I'm interested to see where it goes, and be able to have an outlet to really kind of support and reinvest in the podcast and see it grow. So yeah, and your support also means that we can develop new content. So I won't, I could probably get an editor, which would free up time for me. And I can run the episodes longer than just the 8 episodes that we do every season, and have them, continuously running. So please visit the website, please donate, please support. And you're also able, if you go onto the website, I'm still trying to figure it out, but if you go onto the website and you want to make multiple donations, so I think right now it's set at like $5, but if you want to make like multiple donations or more than that, you can click on the arrow, and the arrow it duplicates the number, so it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, and you can donate more. So please take a look. So now that's done. This week we have a genuine celebrity in the house. Samantha-Kemp Jackson, aka Multiple Mayhem Mamma, is a parenting guru, an all-around sounding board and expert. And a few months ago, and I sat down with her a few months ago to do this interview based off of questions that had come from all of you. So I had asked in the Woke Mommy Chatter group and on the Facebook page for questions, any kind of questions you had about parenting, and I threw in some of the ones that I have because, hey, there's a parenting expert, and why wouldn't I ask the questions that I'm struggling with? So we took all those, and what happened was, I think, a great episode combined. And Samantha is just so full of knowledge and such great advice. I think if you're a parent, if you're not a parent, but you're around kids, this is well worth the listen. So please listen and share and enjoy. So I know you as parenting guru. I hear you on CBC. I've seen some of your articles and different things. And so tell me a little bit about how you became Samantha, parenting guru.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. And you know what, I would never call myself a parenting guru because I always say to people, nobody knows really what they're doing when it comes to parenting. And it's one of those kind of things that you learn as you go. And I have an adult daughter. I have two 9-year-old boys, identical twins, and a teenager. And with each of the children, even the grown-up one, I'm still learning. So it's one of those kind of things that you learn as you go. And even though there are so many parenting books and advice columns and experts that are out there, it's not a one size fits all thing because every child is different and you need to parent them differently. So, my best advice in terms of just very general parenting advice is go with your gut and go with what feels right to you for that particular child. Because I'm sure even with your two kids, you probably don't treat them exactly the same because they will not respond exactly the same. Right. So you probably figure out what works best with one child in terms of, parenting behavior and discipline, and maybe it'll work with the other, but not necessarily.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the main questions I have is about yelling. So I feel like I was a very level-headed parent I don't know what happened, but these kids turned probably maybe, I think my son must have been 6 or 7. And it was just a shift in their relationship. And it was they became very adversarial. And I feel like I lost control and I have not regained it. And I feel like I wake up and they're running all over the place. It's go clean your teeth and wash your face. We have to go. Go get yourself ready. And I feel like I'm screaming all the time and I just need to take it down. And so how do you avoid screaming at your kids? How do you not do that?
Well, first of all, let me just say, give yourself a break. Don't feel guilty about screaming. We all do it. Well, most of us do. And the ones that don't, I say more power to you. But it's really difficult because we know, people who have kids know that kids can push you over the brink. Even before I was getting ready to talk to you today, I was, let's say, raising my voice with my own kids because they weren't listening and they weren't behaving. It's a goal that I have to try not to yell at them as much as I have in the past. And it's a goal that I have to work on every day. And I think all parents do. It's very difficult, especially younger children, and especially when you have the dynamics of a sibling at home. Because as you probably know, and as your listeners probably know, they know how to press the buttons, not only with each other, but with you as a parent. So I would say a couple of things. First of all, I would say, try to be mindful, try to get into that meditative state where you make that decision that you're going to, be in the moment and you're going to try to reason with them, which may sound counterintuitive because sometimes you just can't reason with kids, but you're going to try to talk to them about what the issue at hand is. And you're going to try to talk to them on the level that they can understand about their behavior. Now, we all have those moments where we feel that, holy smokes, this kid is driving me around the bend and I'm going to lose it in 2 seconds. Perhaps that's the time that you walk away. And I mean, walk away from your child. And I'm not saying leaving them alone in a mall, but I'm saying that if you're at home and they're getting on your nerves, you can easily say to them, you know what, I don't want to listen to this right now. You're not listening to me. I'm feeling very frustrated and mommy's feeling really upset right now. So I'm going to walk away and I'm going to go into the other room. I'd like you to stay here and think about what you're doing or what you're saying. And when you've calmed down and when I've calmed down, I'm going to come back and I'm going to talk to you. How about that? I think it's perfectly fine for a reversal timeout. So you saying to your kid, you know what, I'm taking the timeout from you because I'm about to lose it.
I love that. I love that. So my 5-year-old, my daughter is very, she's very expressive and it's great. I love that she's a good communicator. So when she's upset, she tells you exactly how she feels. So she'll say things like, you're so mean and you're hurting my heart and you're tearing it into pieces and it'll never go back together. And she just that's the way she talks.
And so
Mm-hmm.
we have like her and I this like back and forth, back and forth. And there are moments where I'm like, oh, I'm outside of myself thinking, I'm having an argument with a 5 year
Mm-hmm.
old. And like
Yes.
that's a good moment for me to be like, you know what? I'm taking a time out.
Yeah, that would
I'm
be a
gonna walk
perfect
away.
time. And another thing I
Yeah.
would say, Carrie, is that, just try to, it's hard to do this because I do it too. I get into these things, these back and forths with my kids, specifically my younger kids. And then I realize, wait a minute, I'm the adult here. Why am I even engaging in this with them? And
Yes.
so when you find
Yes.
yourself going down that rabbit hole and going into this back and forth with your kid and saying, well, no, you said this, and just say to yourself, wait a minute, I'm the adult here and I'm stepping out. Maybe that's a time for a timeout. Or maybe it's a time to say to your child, you know what? I don't need to go back and forth with you and rationalize with you because at the end of the day, I'm the adult, I'm the mom, and what I say goes. That's what I say. And,
Yeah, you're
that's
right.
just at the end of the day, the buck has to stop somewhere and it stops with you. So, if they're not comfortable or happy with that response that you give them, maybe that's the time to say, okay, well, you know what? Think about what I said, take that time out, and let's regroup and we can talk about why at the end of the day, what I say goes because I'm the mom.
Yeah. Yeah. I need to be tougher, is what you're telling me. I hear
Well,
you.
I don't even think it's about being tougher. I think it's about clarifying the situation for the child and reminding them that you are the parent. Because I think we live in this time where we are so, we coddle our kids a lot. We are afraid of, not doing the right thing in terms of parenting, which is valid. You don't want to make mistakes in parenting. But we also need to remind our kids that at the end of the day, we're the ones who are responsible for them. We're the ones who are taking care of them. We're the ones who have their best interest at heart over and above anyone else. We're the ones who know what the best decisions are for them because we know them. We are their parent, and we have the experience to know what's going to work and what's not going to work. So I think that's a big part of parenting is reminding your child that you know what, I've lived a long time. I know that if I say it's not a good idea to eat 5 cookies before dinner, there's a reason for that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. So this question came from our Woke Mommy Chatter group. So developmentally appropriate conversations. So what's the line between having conversations around privilege and not freaking, this person says, not freaking my child out and giving them important information about privilege? How do you handle big discussions like that?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a really good question. And I would say that, and I've talked about this before in different channels and such. And I always say, speak to your child, obviously, honestly, but also at a level that they can understand. So the way that you're going to speak to a 5-year-old is not going to be the same way that you're going to speak to an 8-year-old or a 12-year-old or a 14-year-old. I think that in terms of, discussions that are more sensitive or more fraught, such as discussions about privilege, I think you have to give a very general landscape of what's happening in the world. And again, it doesn't mean you have to drill down into specifics about, you know, what's happening in politics and such. But I think that having those open discussions about, you know, how what children are hearing or feeling and kind of building upon that is a starting point. So, how you could start those conversations could be open-ended. You could ask your child some questions like, have you noticed anything that people are talking about at school in the schoolyard? How is Johnny feeling about XYZ? Do you know why we're wearing whatever? In Canada, we wear orange shirts for Orange Shirt Day to, underscore and remember, issues that
And
have happened in the Indigenous community. So you could
mhm.
start with, something that's occurring in the news or at school, or, ask them a general question about, what have you learned at school about different cultures, backgrounds, races, religions. How do you feel about that? That type of thing. So open-ended questions, I think, are the first line of discussion with your child, and questions again that are within the realm of their age. So if they're younger, you can talk more simplistically, but it doesn't mean that you can't get the conversation going because these discussions about race and privilege and issues surrounding it are important. And I think the earlier that you talk to your child about it, the better.
So that leads into another question that came out of the group, which was it's the same question, I guess, is how young is too young to start talking to your kid about race? And this person says, I have a toddler. So I remember when my kids were probably not two, maybe three going on to four. My son in particular, like, started to notice color. And that's when
Hmm.
questions would be like, well, why am I brown? And so how do you handle those kind of questions in a way that doesn't make them feel, um, that there's something wrong with them because they're different?
Well, I think different is a relative term, and I think that is perfectly fine for a child to ask the question, why am I brown? Why does he look like this? I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think that what we need to remember as parents is that it's how we respond and react to the question that's going to form the basis of how they feel about themselves. So it's a perfectly valid question. If a child says, why am I brown? And that person is white or that person is whatever, you can say, again, within the realm of what they can understand, well, there are different people who are born to different parents and different families from around the world. People from this part of the world look like this. People from where we come from look like this. It's not better. It's not worse. It's just different from each other, but we're all the same. I mean, it sounds kind of simple, but it doesn't have to be something that's presented in such a fraught way. So you might want to, start that discussion with your child and make sure that when you're talking about these topics, that how you respond is in a positive way. So difference doesn't mean bad. So when your child says something like, why is my skin brown? Say, because mommy and daddy's skin is brown, and the child usually looks like the parents. And I love my skin color and I love your skin color, and your friend Johnny has a different skin color, and he loves the way he looks too, and so do his parents, and you're both the same, and whatever, like it doesn't have to be something that is presented as a negative. I think it's really about that, because that's how the child is going to pick up those subtle or, underlying cues or clues that might tell them that different is bad, and it's not.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Sorry, that has me thinking a lot, a lot. But yeah, that's very true. Um, okay, so what are the best ways to handle public tantrums in kids?
Well, I have to say, first of all, I have four children and I've dealt with public tantrums a lot. And, it always, at first, with my first child and, second, at first you're mortified. And
Yeah,
later on you realize, what, this just happens. And all of us who are parents, like when I see parents now whose kids are having a meltdown, I have a sympathetic eye and ear, and if I can help them in any way, I mean, I've pulled out my keys out of my purse to distract a baby beside me at a checkout line at the grocery store because the kid was starting to melt down. So you do what you have to do. But in terms of meltdowns, if the child is completely un um, unable to stop screaming and you're in a public place like a mall or a supermarket or wherever, then I would remove them from the situation. I would just say, I think we're going to have to go now. And if you have to, like you said, a toddler, you can physically pick them up, pick up the toddler and say,
yeah,
you know what, this isn't working right now. We're going to leave. We're going to go outside and have a timeout, or we're going to get in the car and we're going to drive home. This isn't working. Um, if you're able to soothe them and calm them down a little bit and talk to them with some type of reason, or explain to them, that this behavior is not appropriate, and they start to listen, then certainly continue on that track. But again, at the end of the day, like any parenting advice, I say, you're the parent, you know best. If you get that feeling that, you know what, this kid's not going to calm down for another 15 minutes, so I think it's time to bail, then bail.
with tantrums, people always think about tantrums in toddlers. Can tantrums extend beyond the toddler years? Not that I'm
Yes,
asking from
absolutely.
personal. Okay. So,
They unfortunately do extend beyond the toddler years, and depending on the child, maybe some children do have behavioral difficulties as they get older, and that's another issue. But yeah, tantrums do extend beyond that. But the good thing about that is that as they get older, you're more able to reason with them and talk to them about their behavior. And if you need to discipline them, and discipline them could be, you know what, you're having a tantrum, you're not listening, you're screaming and freaking out. So I think I'm going to need to take away your screen time, or I'm going to need to
yeah,
have you stay in your room for half an hour until you calm down. So as they get older, yes, unfortunately, tantrums can continue, but you do have more leeway in terms of giving them discipline and punishment that they understand and will make them think about not doing it again.
Yeah. So my daughter, she, she's a great baby and a
Mm-hmm.
horrible toddler, like just horrible. I think if she'd been my
Mm-hmm.
first child, I don't know if I would have had any more. But she, it's awful to say, but it's true. She, so at around maybe like 4, I thought we turned a corner,
Mm-hmm.
and she was quite good for a period, and then
Mm-hmm.
flip back. And so now that's why I was saying to you, we will get into these. Yeah, she's totally rational, and she's so smart. Like she's too smart for her own good, and we'll have these conversations while she's crying and upset and totally trying to
Mm-hmm.
rationalize, and so they're like she's having a tantrum, but she's articulating like every last thing that she's feeling while she's having this tantrum. And it's really interesting. It's funny, but
Mm-hmm.
it's also just very, it's hard to kind of be in that. But yeah.
Well, that I actually think that's good that she's articulating how she's feeling when she's having a tantrum, because a lot of times when kids have tantrums, they're just screaming or they're
Oh
crying or
no.
they're not making a lot of sense. You probably have an idea of why they're upset, but they don't articulate. So the fact that she's saying that, I actually think that's really good, because she's aware that she understands where her anger or frustration or upset is coming from, and that's a starting point for you to be able to say, okay, so you're saying that you're mad at me because I told you that you couldn't, whatever,
Right.
play with that toy. Let's talk about that. Because if she's articulating what it is, you can kind of hone in on what that is and say to her, okay, you're upset about this. Let's talk about why mommy said that you can't have that toy or that cookie or whatever. So
Right.
that actually gives you something to kind of hold on to hone in that conversation where she might start listening and you can start rationalizing and reasoning with her. I mean, she sounds quite smart that she's able to do that in the midst of her upset. So, I would jump onto that and I would, just say, okay, you said you're upset about the cookie. Let's talk about that, what you're saying you're crying about.
Yeah.
Because that'll probably refocus her efforts and you could probably rationalize with her to some degree at that point.
Yeah. Oh God, one can only hope. So this one is a good one. So this is also from a group. So how do I get through divorce without damaging my kids? I don't want to share custody, but I have to. How do I survive? Oh, this makes me sad.
Well, I think, and that's a hard one. And I know that a lot of people deal with that. And I think that, I know it's really, really upsetting and very painful. And, you've got a lot of feelings happening at the time and you're worried about your kids and you're worried about yourself and you're sad about the end of your marriage and all of those things. But try to keep in mind when you're going through it that, your most important priority is your child or children, and you as the parent, the mother or the father, love your kids and you want the best for them. And having the best for them and doing the best for them means that regardless of what's happened with your spouse or soon to be ex-spouse, you need to kind of put it aside and try to be as civil as possible and not to badmouth the other spouse, because that is the other parent of the child. And the child needs to feel that they don't have to take sides. In terms of your own personal grief about the end of the relationship, I think that's absolutely something that, if you're able to address it with, a counselor or a professional or somebody who can help you, then certainly do that. But trying to, try to keep the child or the children the focus of, um, your interaction with them, and in knowing that the best thing for the child is for you to be civil to the other parent, that can help lead you along the way.
How do you uh, how do you prepare kids? I guess. I mean, essentially, they're going from having one home to two. So how do you prepare
Mm-hmm.
them for that the life that they're going to have now, where it's completely split? So they're spending half their time in one place and half their time in the other.
Well, I think this is where it comes back to both of the parents, and that's why it's important to have that civility and discussion with your soon to be ex-spouse, even if you're having a hard time with them. I know it's really difficult. Maybe you need to get a counselor or somebody impartial or a mediator involved, but it's really important to have that relationship with that other person so that you're both on the same page in terms of setting up the two households so that the child or children feel comfortable. So ideally, the child should be, if they're going to be going back and forth between the two houses, whatever, 1 week here, 1 week there, or on the weekends or whatever, the child should feel that it's fairly seamless. So not only the drop off and pick up, there shouldn't be acrimony, but also that they have a home in each of the places. And to be able to do that, you're going to have to consult with that other person about, okay, how's that going to be set up? Where are they going to sleep? What clothes or toys or whatever are they going to have over there? So I think it comes back to, the most important thing is having a civil relationship with the other person, as however you can figure that out. If you need to get a professional involved, such as a mediator or a family counselor or a good friend or an impartial friend or whomever, then do it and then take it from there.
All right. So here's another one. How do you deal with a sore loser? How can you help them deal with loss effectively? So
you're talking about in terms of kids losing, like games
yeah,
and stuff
so
like
I guess if you have, I'm going to use my son as an example. It's really interesting because he plays soccer and he can deal with loss of a game when he's got his team around him. But if we went bowling, I remember, and he wasn't winning and he just was not, he was miserable the whole game. He just was not happy. If we're playing a board game and he loses or his sister wins, he gets so upset. So how do you help? We've had conversations, we'll pull him aside and we'll talk to him about, you just keep trying, that you're not going to win everything. Next time you play, you try harder. What's a different strategy you could take, right? Like we've had those conversations, but I would say that nothing really has gotten through to him yet. And he's still, and maybe it'll take him some time, but he still struggles with that. And I don't know if it's his age, he's 8, but how do you deal with that? And how do you get kids to kind of just shake it off?
Well, it's a process and it's a trial and it does take time. And, kids, they want to win. And some kids are more competitive than others. Some don't care as much, but some really do. And, when we have our kids in professional sports, like my boys play soccer too, they want to win. And when they lose, they're not happy either. But, it's one of those kind of parenting discussions that you have to keep underscoring and facilitating on an ongoing basis until they get it. It's about talking to them about sportsmanship, about, you played a good game, you did your best, and that's all you need to do. Go in there and do your best, and you might win and you might lose. And that's where that old expression comes in, you win some, you lose some. And sometimes you're going to lose. And, how you lose and how you handle losing and being gracious about it and, saying good game to the winner is going to show what kind of a person you are. So I think it's just one of those kind of lessons. It takes longer with some kids. Some kids, they get it right away, but some kids are just not really competitive. Like myself, I'm actually not a really competitive person, and I never was, even as a child. So when, if I play a game with somebody and they won, I think, oh, well, that's good. You did a good game. But other kids, they get really upset. So it's a personality thing. Some people are just really competitive. And the ones who are really competitive, I think you have to just keep kind of drilling into them. You know what? You're going to win some, you're going to lose some. It's not how you whether you win or lose, it's how you play the game. Be a gracious loser, say, congratulations, whatever. It's one of those things you just have to keep, kind of plying them with over and over until they do finally get it. And they do get it. And you know what? I'll tell you, sometimes, people get to adult age, people get to middle age, and they're still not happy losers. I know adult people who are angry when they lose. Some people don't ever completely get it. It's a personality thing, and it's just, there's not much you can do for those individuals.
So you just said something that's really interesting to me, and that's about repetition and repetitive, and you have to repeat and repeat. And I know, so how much of parenting, because I feel like I say the same thing all the time. So how much of parenting is really about just literally repeating yourself?
I think a lot of it's about repeating yourself. A lot of it, because first of all, kids often don't listen. They don't pay attention. You tell them over. I mean, how many times have you said, pick up your shoes when you get them off the floor, or, don't throw your knapsack on the ground in the middle of the door. Like, I say the same things to my kids practically every day for months at a time. And it's like, are you listening to me at all? Are you listening? But, eventually one day it just clicks in their brain. It just crystallizes and they do it. Some kids, again, just like the competition thing, some kids, it takes longer than others. And yes, the short answer is yes, repetition is a huge part of parenting. Unfortunately, you just have to keep saying the same thing over and over and over again to some kids. they will eventually get it, but it does take some time.
Awesome. All right. How you doing? I know we've gone through a lot of
Good.
questions. Right. So, okay, I've got a few more.
Hmm.
This is one of mine. So being there for older kids, this is something that someone said to me on another podcast, and it just, I don't know, it clicked, and it has stuck with me. And what she said is that she's like, you think your kids need you most when they're young, but they actually need you even more when they're older. And so our conversation was around working, like motherhood and working as a working mom, and how you find time
Hmm.
and making time for your kids. And she had just basically like adjusted her whole life, and quit her job so she could work from home and do all those things for her kids,
Hmm.
even though they're older. They're not young, they're not toddlers anymore, but they're older.
Hmm.
And I think because I hadn't thought about it in that way, and I was so focused on getting through these young years, it's
Hmm.
really stuck with me, and it's made a lot of
Hmm.
sense around a lot of the problems that we see with older kids. So what are your thoughts
Yeah.
around that? And what would you say to parents, I guess, who are parenting through, like they're going through the parenting process? What would you say to them as your kids get older? What are the needs that they have?
Well, I don't know if you necessarily, again, it depends on the child, but I don't think you necessarily have to be there more. You're just going to be there differently.
Mm,
So, I've got 4 kids. My oldest is an adult woman, married, living in another city, but I
yeah,
still FaceTime and talk to her often because she needs me in different ways. We talk more kind of like friends, and we can talk about things that I would never have talked to her about, when she was younger. And conversely, with my younger kids, they need me on a more practical level. They need me to fill out their forms for school and to go to their parent teacher night and to pick them up from whatever, game or whatever that they've gone to. So, the bottom line is you're always a parent until you're not on this planet anymore. You're always a parent. And that's a lovely thing, actually. It's nice that your kids need you in different ways as they get older. I would say that, for the your friend or the woman who said that she put her job to be at home and be there with her more, I think that's wonderful if she's able to do that. And if people are able to do that, that's great. A lot of people can't do that. A lot of people can't quit their 9 to 5 job, but that doesn't mean
yeah,
that it detracts away from them being a parent. It just means that, they just need to, plan out their schedule in terms of how much time they can spend with their kids, and just try to remember that it's not the quantity, it's the quality of time. Because we all have to work to make a living, to take care of our families and stuff. And, I say to parents, don't feel guilty that you're working. You're working to take care of your family. And if that means that you're working
mm,
long hours and you see your child for 1 or 2 hours during the week, it's the quality of that time that you have with your child, not the quantity. They know that you're their parent and you love them. And nobody can replace a mother or a father. So, just keep that in mind. Because I feel, and especially with women, I feel like women always are made to feel guilty about
yeah,
the gains that we try to make for our families. And I think that needs to stop. I mean, most women I know, most moms that I know, they work their tails off to do the best for their kids, whatever that may be, whatever their profession or career is. They're working to try to help their family and their kids, and they love their kids, and that's why they're doing it. And you know what? Kids do realize that. When they grow up and they get older, they realize, Mom, you did what you needed to do for me, and I appreciate that. So I wouldn't feel guilty, but it's all about quality, not quantity.
yeah. I mean, that's absolutely right. It's about quality, not quantity. How do you make sure you're having quality time, especially when kids are in so many extracurricular activities? How do you manage all that?
Well, that's one of the things that I've written about that and talked about that before. And I think that we're in this culture right now, Kiri, where I think that parents, or I don't know if it's parents or if it's society, is saying that kids need to be in all these different lessons and this and that. And I don't agree with that at all because I grew up in a different time and I wasn't in a whole bunch of extracurricular lessons. Like I had some, I took music lessons and I did this and I did that. But it wasn't like it is now where I see some families have kids in like 3, 4 lessons a week, plus school, plus weekends, plus this, plus that. And I think, first of all, I think it's exhausting for not only the child, but the parent, because if your child is a minor, guess what? You're the one driving them and picking them up or taking them on the transit or whatever. So that's a
Yeah,
lot of stress and exhaustion for a parent and the child. And I also think it's the quality over the quantity. They don't need to be in all these different lessons. And I also think that kids need a break too. They're tired too. Like think about when you come home from work, or even if you work from home, like when you're done working, You just want to chill out a bit. You don't want to have to like get up and go to another thing. So I think that, I think as a society, we need to kind of step back and say, why are we feeling that we have to have our kids in all these different lessons? Let them just do nothing. Let them just find their own creativity and activity at home, because we used to use our imaginations more, I think, more
Yeah.
than we do now in terms of kids. And I think that we need to kind of get back to that.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's really hard. And we're one of
Mm-hmm.
those families that our kids are in a bunch of different things and it's exhausting. And I'm going to spend the
Mm-hmm.
next couple hours trying to figure out how we're going to make it all work and who's doing what and when am I going to be on duty with them and when my
And that's
husband's
not a
going to
lot of
be able to
stress for
take them. And
parents.
yeah, but you
It's a
feel
lot of
so
stress.
pressured.
But you know what? You have to ask yourself, like, we all have to collectively ask ourselves, what are we getting out of it? Like, what is the cost benefit analysis? Does it make sense that I'm running around working all day and then I have to run home and like throw something together really quickly and then go out again and take my kid to this and that and do this 3 or 4 times a week? I think that, like, first, like, I guess for myself, I'm just at the stage in my life where I think I am too tired and old to do this. I'm not doing it. My kids, they play soccer and they do a couple things here and there, but that's
Yeah,
it. Because, think about when your kids get older. I'll tell you, like you said, your kids. I think you said 5 and how old are the other one?
eight.
8?
Yeah,
No,
8. Yeah,
8. Yes. So they have homework too, right? And they have, like, they're gonna have stuff that you need to help them with. So when does all that get done? And then there's the family stuff that you need to do in the
yeah,
house, like, you got to do laundry, you got to do grocery shopping, you got, just those practical kind of things. And it's hard to fit everything in. So if you can take a little bit off your plate, and I say to parents, just take stuff off your plate that you don't have to do. And I think also as well, don't worry about what other people are saying and thinking. It is none of their business what you choose to do. So if your kid's friend down the street is going this 5 lessons and their parents are saying, well, why don't you put Janie in these lessons too? Just say, actually, no, I think that,
yeah,
she's good. And also, it's also a financial strain too. Like, who can afford all these different
yeah.
lessons? I mean, I
But how do
can't.
you,
It's
so,
a lot of money, and I have twins, so everything is
right, oh
double.
God.
Everything is double. So,
Yeah. But so I mean, yeah, there's that social pressure piece, but there's also the aspect of you want to give your kids like every advantage. So you feel like if you're not doing certain
hmm
things, that you're in a way you're putting them at a disadvantage or you're letting them down a bit, like you're not preparing them. And so I
hmm
think that's where we struggle, right? Because
yeah,
it's like, oh, well, we want to make sure that they're getting every advantage that they can get, so that they can achieve
hmm
whatever they want to achieve. And I think that's like that's the big piece for me anyway, like the big struggle.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, again, I think what you're saying, Carrie, is about parental guilt, and we need to stop feeling guilty and bad about the decisions and choices that we make for our parents, or as parents for our kids. Like, you should not feel bad that you can't be out every night of the week taking your kids to this and that. It's just not realistic. It's not viable from a financial point of view for most of us, unless you're independently wealthy. And if
Yeah.
you are, then I'm jealous. But most of us can't afford to, have because it's expensive.
It
It really
really
is. Like,
is.
I've learned that especially since I've had twins, because everything is double. And it's like, oh, these lessons are whatever,
Ugh,
$300 for this set of lessons. It's like, oh, for me, it's
yeah,
600.
that's
Great.
crazy. Yeah.
So, lessons are expensive. And then there's a time constraint. Don't feel guilty. I think that this is something that I think, generally speaking, and I speak about a lot, it's about that parental guilt that we're feeling, and we're made to feel by society that we're not good enough as parents. And I really, really strongly believe that parents are the best arbiters of what is best for their kids. So you're the mom, you know best that, you know what, your kid's going to be okay if he or she only takes 1 lesson a week. That's okay. Like, it's not a big deal. And you can do stuff at home. Everything doesn't have to cost money.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really, again, it goes back to what I said a little while ago about that quality time. Like, at the end of the day, you want your kid to grow up to be a productive, independent, well balanced, kind, giving adult. And those are qualities that you as a parent can teach your child without spending money. I mean, you can do things at home with your child. You can play games with your child where they learn lessons. They learn how to what we talked about before, be a gracious loser. They learn strategy and skill. They learn, whatever. So it doesn't have to be, a paid and, extracurricular activity where you're going out of the home and you're taking your kid, here and there. You can do a lot of things at home and teach them lessons and cultivate them to be the type of person you want them to be at home.
So I have last question. How do you deal with
hmm
first crushes? So I have just come to the realization that we are now a parent of a tween. Because someone told me that the tween years started at 8, which I was shocked at because I thought, what? Really?
Oh, man.
So,
do they really? I don't know.
I didn't even look it up. Someone just told me, and I just literally went into shock and thought, oh my God, I have a tween. And that same week, my son came home to tell me he said, oh, I need to tell you something. And he's like, but you can't tell anyone, and you're going to tell the whole family. And I don't know if I want to tell you, but I have a crush on this girl. So, and I thought, oh my God, like, the first thing that came into my mind was all the Me Too and all the discussions around consent and all that stuff. And I thought, wait, he's 8. Like, let's, how do you deal with first crushes? And then how do you, in an age of Me Too, I guess, how do you have that conversation with your kids, especially a boy?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that isn't it sad that an innocent, sweet crush, an 8-year-old, is fraught with Me Too and sexual assault and consent? It's really sad, but it's the world in which we live right now. Because, when I was younger, if you were 8 years old and somebody had a crush on you or you had a crush on them, that was it. I'm glad that we're having discussions about consent and Me Too and what that means. And I have boys. I have 2 9-year-old boys, and I will be darned if they grow up to be, like these horrible men that we're seeing in the news. I won't mention any names, but, I think that conversation starts really early. I think that it's really important to first of all, teach your child, our sons especially, about respecting women, about women being equal, about girls and women having the right to convey what their feelings are. And if they are not comfortable with something, that no means no. Obviously, you're not going to talk about, extreme situations with an 8-year-old, but I think it's really important to start planting those seeds about women and girls' equality and respecting them. It's about respect. The whole thing about consent is about respect, because if somebody, if a male, tries something with a female and the female says, please don't do that, please stop. If you're a respectful person, you'll stop, right? So I think that that's the lesson that starts the discussion about consent and such.
If you enjoy listening to the show, be sure to subscribe to this podcast so you get automatic updates of new episodes every Tuesday. Also, leave a review and let other people know what you think of the show. Don't forget to follow Woke Mommy Chatter at Woke Mommy on Twitter, on Instagram, and follow along on Facebook at Woke Mommy Chatter. Be sure to visit the Woke Mommy Chatter website at www.wokemommychatter.com to help support the production of the podcast.
Thanks for listening to Woke Mommy Chatter.